Hello, friends on LinkedIn. I'm Jim Collison. I'm here with Jessica Dawson, and we want to welcome you to our LinkedIn Live. Jessica, how are you? Great to see you.
I'm doing well, Jim. Great to be here with you, as always.
Well, we're going to have some fun today, and I think we have an important topic that we're going to talk about in leadership. And if you're just joining in, go ahead and throw your top five there in chat. We'd love to highlight that, and then we have a question for you. And Jessica, I'll ask you the same question, which is, what strength have you been leaning with or leading? Sorry, what have you been leading with lately? So let's start with you. So audience wise, if you're listening live, we'd love to know specifically what strength are you leading with. Jessica, what do you think as you think about today? What are you leading with out of your top five?
I love this question. I think all of my strengths are always working in concert with each other. I do think lately I've been leaning in on my connectedness. It's sometimes referred to as the hippie strength. I don't know if you've heard referred to it
Yep.
as
Yeah. No, I
that.
understand.
But there's this mysteriousness about this strength where nothing happens by chance, everything happens for a reason. And I've been doing a lot of keynotes lately, and what I have found is I need to do a certain amount of prep, but if I over prep, it almost throws me off. And so there's a little bit of a mystery or just like an unfolding that happens when you can show up fully and just kind of let things take their course. I also think that it allows for me to connect the dots better as I'm observing what the audience is thinking, what they're feeling. And so I'm going to say connectedness.
I like it. I
Yeah,
like it. Yeah. No, I love that idea, especially as you're connecting with people. And I think kind of based on our strengths, everybody does this a little bit differently. I know some folks who really need to prepare, in fact, maybe over prepare so that they have this cachet of content available. And I think as we're talking about leadership, that may be important as well. Some folks in leading need to prepare a lot to know the people that they're leading and to work with them. Others can kind of do it on the fly, and both are successful, right? Both can
sure.
be successful ways of doing that. I think for me, we're in a busy time, and I have a Ranger number one, and so it's, I love to have 1,000 things going on at the same time. I hear a lot of folks saying there's just too much happening, and I'm like, this is great, right? So I kind of leaning in by leading with a Ranger. We want to encourage folks as you're joining us, throw your top five in chat. Producer Riley is in the background; she'll throw those up on screen for us. And the question is, we want to know what you're leading with, what themes, what strengths, however you want to state it, your talents in action. We want to hear a little bit about that. Jessica, as we think about, as we think a little bit about kind of as we're coming out of this pandemic and these now, I mentioned, I feel like everybody's been busy. What do you think? Does that change for you and your role? Does that change for anything on how you lead or what you're going to lead with based on your top five?
Oh, great question. I think that it definitely does because the requests have been a little bit different in terms of what clients are wanting. So, getting a lot of requests about can you come in and get people really excited to come back into the office, or can you come in and do a session on well being? And it's not that we didn't do sessions on well being before, but I just think it's like the positioning of it. So my strengths from that standpoint, I think I'm also leaning into my futuristic,
Mm,
which is just about how do we think in terms of possibilities, what's over the horizon, can we be anticipatory and get excited about what's to come, as opposed to spending so much time thinking about the past, right? Because I think that something gets lost when that happens. So I think it's my futuristic, but then also the client requests have been different. And also from a coaching perspective, right? Working with leaders that are thinking about how do I lead through disruption, right? And what does that look like? So not even just necessarily the pandemic, but ironically enough, I was taking a group of managers through a course. All of them are former leaders within the organization. And during that, the company got acquired. And
Mm,
so just having these really robust conversations about how do we now lead through this when we're actually a little bit scared ourselves, right? How do we relate, encourage, inspire during these times of disruption? So
yeah.
um, I think futuristic allows for me to pivot in those types of moments where we're still in this realm of possibilities.
Yeah, I love that. I love that future thinking, right? The future opportunities that are coming up.
Mhm.
We'll encourage if you're listening, if you joined us live, continue to put your top five there in chat. And I'm seeing some great. The question we asked was, "What strengths have you been leading with lately?" And we're seeing some responses. You can continue to do that. I'm
Yeah.
here with Jessica Dawson, and we're spending some time really talking about leading with your strengths in mind. And Jessica, let's get to know you a little bit. One, tell us.
Jim, before we get to me,
Oh,
can I just
yeah,
share something with the
yeah,
audience?
yeah.
I wasn't going to share this, but now I feel compelled to share it. So maybe it's my connectedness, but I just want to give kudos to Jim in his leadership in times of disruption. Um, in our role, nothing's ever wrong, right? But we did have a little bit of a technology snafu leading into this. And Jim has this ability to stay calm under pressure that I just really love. So I just want to thank you for your leadership in that moment before we transitioned to me.
You,
And then he took me through like a wellness exercise. He was like, do we need to do a little mindfulness before we go into the show? And I really appreciate that in you. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, Jessica, I appreciate you saying that. It's one of the things, again, practice when we think about putting your themes, putting your talents, putting your strengths in action. That doesn't necessarily mean they're perfect right out the gate. That
Mhm.
experience, right? And I've done thousands of these. And so they prepared me like there's nothing now as we were getting ready for this and the technology wasn't participating. The leadership in that for me was like, you know what? I've done 1,000 of these. It'll come together, or it won't, and we'll figure it out, right? It's
Yes.
going to be just fine. So that maybe that was maybe that was serendipitous today as we were getting ready to talk
Mm,
about this
totally.
topic, right? And just
Yes.
leading through that moment of crisis and just saying, it'll be okay, and if it's not okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those important lessons in that. Okay, let's get to know you because we're going to be spending some time with you today. I appreciate that recognition, though. Um,
Absolutely.
tell us a little bit about your role here and give us your top five.
Sure. So I'm a learning and development consultant based out of downtown Chicago, but originally from New Jersey. So I still claim my East Coast roots. My top five: futuristic, relator, activator, developer, and individualization. And I have the great pleasure of turning Gallup's research and science into different learning interventions. So typically, I coach, I facilitate our course offerings, I do a lot of executive presentations and keynotes, and which keeps me busy, but I love it because I really love developing human beings. That is
Mm.
my passion. So I get to do that a lot in this role.
You just practiced that developer individualization combo on me just a minute ago, which was super nice. Great to be the recipient of that in your role here. What do you think? So, as we we're talking about this, the importance of leading with your strengths. I mean, for let's talk first about the individual leader using their own strengths and that. Why is it important? What's that self-awareness a benefit the leader who understands their strengths and then is using them in the way they lead?
For sure. I think that the benefits are endless, but the words that come to mind are ease, authenticity, um, being able to get into flow, and also sustainability. There's a saying that's coming to mind right now of be yourself, everyone else is taken. And when we think about Clifton Strengths, I just think that it allows you to really lean into who you are. And here's the thing: we do give a lot of weight to words. I talk about this in coaching all the time, giving a lot of weight to that word coach, but we also give a lot of weight to the word leader and what it means to be a leader. But in reality, all of us, or likely everyone who's listening to this call, you have been a leader in your own right at some point in your life, but maybe you just didn't realize that that was what was happening. So the ability to really lean in and study that and have an understanding about how you're landing with your folks, I just think it's so important to do
Mm,
that, so that you understand when there are those opportunities for you to step into that leadership capacity.
I love that. As we think about The perfect role in a leader or the perfect set of strengths? This is a question I get all the time. Is there a top five that is ideal for leaders? And we'll talk more about the kind of the definition of leadership here in a second. But is there a perfect top five for that? And talk a little bit about that.
No, there is not. Right. So we know with strengths, it's all about pathways to excellence, and it's more so about the how you'll get there as opposed to what you will be doing. And leadership is no exception. Right. So if the outcome is being a leader, there are so many pathways to get there. And the beauty in all of this is that all of your strengths can play a role in how you show up. And they are playing a role. So you should pay attention to how they're doing that. Right. So there's not a perfect silver bullet to leadership. And you can do that and resonate in your own right with whoever it is that you're coming across. And in fact, when I coach leaders and they're able to really step in and own their talents, they get better results and it's not as exhausting. Because we know with our talents is what we do most naturally. When you try to be someone else or try to be who you're not, it's just not sustainable. It's not um, it doesn't give you the ROI that you had hoped it would because people can smell out and tell when you're being inauthentic,
Mm,
right?
hmm.
Um, Before the pandemic, we used to do so much travel in this role, or I used to do so much travel in this role. And I remember being on an airline, and there's two airlines that are coming to mind. One where you get on the plane and they're really silly and telling you the safety instructions. If you think hard enough, you know the airline that I'm talking about. And there's this other airline that's very much more corporate, more business-like, and they tried to bring that in, and everybody was just kind of looking around like, what is going on? And I think that people can tell when there is an inauthenticity to your personal brand and who you
Mm.
are, especially for the folks that are reporting into you and maybe they have at some for a long time and you're trying to put on this mask of leadership. I think people see through that.
Yeah. We want to interact with you on this. And so if you're listening live, you can throw your questions in chat. If you're listening to us on the Clifton Strengths podcast, of course you can't do that, but of course you can always send us your questions, coaching@gallup.com. Um, James actually asks a really good question. I don't think he intended to, but I'm going to turn it into one. He says, I lead through my number one adaptability by trying to respond to what's right in front of me and needed right now, right? And we're going to we referred to this just a second ago. The challenge is that many times what's needed right now requires a great deal of preparation and can be overwhelming at times. Just because we think about that, I'm in leadership and I have this certain set of themes that allows me to be powerful, but maybe in the moment, something else is needed. As we think about the consulting on that, turn your individualization on here for a second.
Mhm.
What kind of advice would we give around that of how do we help leaders who are feeling like they're maybe in that spot?
Mhm. Yeah, I love this question because it actually speaks to a big point about leadership, about having that agility, and all of us, adaptability or other strengths included, may have this tendency to want to be all things to all people or to want to get it right now. But great leaders have this ability to be vulnerable and also transparent. So I think there's a power in being able to call out what can't be done right now, but also calling out what can be done right now. And in doing that, I think what you allow for is for people to have that relatability, and also for people to kind of lean into where you're taking them a little bit more, as opposed to putting on the facade that you have it all together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you can just call it out, you actually gain more followers because there's a relatability there, right?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I love the idea, and I think sometimes too in our leadership roles, we think we have to, as the leaders, have to have all the answers, and
Mm,
that may be a great opportunity to be transparent with your team and say, team, I'm usually really, I want to help here, but all my everything I have is leaning towards adaptability, to use this example. But
yes.
what I need is this. Who can help me with this?
Ooh, I love
Right? Who can step up. Again, the pressure seems to be, no, I'm the leader, I've got to do it, I've got to make the decision. You know, there's a great opportunity to partner with the team, or even, and I think this is such an underused group of people, is management teams. Like a group of managers, I think sometimes maybe they feel like that's too competitive, or they're too embarrassed to say, like, as a leader, I don't have it all together. Well, guess what, none of us have it all together, right? So an
Right.
opportunity to use others and a management team. I don't know, what, Jessica, what else would you add to that? What does that inspire in you?
Absolutely. I mean, I absolutely love where you took this in terms of how do we get the team involved and spread out the ownership of the leadership. If I don't know, can I ask for help? So I think that that demonstrates vulnerability. It's also bringing me back to actually last month I coached a team of executives. So they all had their teams, and one of the biggest things that we coached around was figuring out how to create synergy within the team, because everybody did feel like they had to have it all together. Everybody did feel like they had to have all of the answers. And in the coaching, one of the things that they're walking away with was that ability to ask for help. And I do think that there's a power in doing that, because you get to stretch your thinking with understanding how other people think, different examples, maybe how they're leading their team, and manager to manager or executive to executive. Oftentimes, those relationships are underutilized. So that might be something that we can kind of lean into whenever we can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I think that self-discovery and those that the question, it creates this. We've been spending a lot of time in the last year thinking about this idea of psychological safety, of being okay in a space. And I think it the framework allows us to be a little safer and say, you know what? I'm really designed to do this, and this isn't the situation. I would
Mhm.
need some help with it, right? Who can help me? Who can jump in and help me do that? Tiffany makes a good point. She says, because three of my top five are driven crazy by doing things the way we've always done them. I lead by helping people see alternative paths to success and help them see themselves and their teams in ways they haven't seen before.
Mhm.
And listen, alternative paths are not always the right way. Sometimes we need, in moments, we need to say, we've practiced this. We know this drill. I
Mhm.
can lead people through that as well, right? I mean, there is, I think sometimes we always think new is best, and yet well practiced drills, the discipline to come back to things that we know is important as well. I don't know. Would you add, Jessica, what would you add to
If
that?
it's not broken,
Right?
let's not add on more. I actually appreciate the sentiment of thinking about alternative pathways, because it does create this expansion of perspective. And I think it is finding the balance of not having to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to, but then maybe there is an opportunity to streamline or to create some thought leadership around optimization or maximization of the way that we work, right? So I think it is kind of finding that balance. And I'll go back to what you said, Jim, about being able to ask the question. And I think that asking the question in this case could be really interesting. What do we need? Who can help? But then I think it's also your ability to listen to your team and also be still and be able to understand the situation very thoroughly as well. And that can help allow for you to land on the sweet spot of the art of the newness, what's worked in the past, right? And how we're going to proceed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Got, let me encourage you to continue. Your comments are actually just are awesome today. So keep doing them. We'll be bringing them in as we go along. Let me. Kelly's asking this question, and then Joanna, I want to get to yours. So Kelly's asking this question, and maybe we can spin this a little bit with leaders, right? Do you
Mhm.
ever recommend retaking the assessment of what your top five strengths are as you grow within your knowledge or career? And maybe you're going from being an individual contributor into a leadership role. Is that a time to retake the assessment? Jessica, I've got some thoughts, but
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, great question. And here's the thing about strengths, we know that they're muscles, right? And our talents get worked out in different capacities when we change roles. If you feel like I am seeing the world completely differently because I've been in this new role. I've had to show up very differently. Maybe you take it again, but I always go back to the why you want to take it again. If you want to take it again because you want to see different strengths that you attribute to leadership, then maybe not a good idea. But if you feel like you have changed at your core by taking on this new role, maybe it's not a bad idea to take it again, right? And see what synergies or repeat strengths you have from that first report that you took. I don't think that you have to take it again all of the time, but there are certain points, individual contributor to a manager, for example, that's one of the hardest jumps to make in corporate America. And in that, you will have to flex and show up very differently, right? So maybe not a bad idea to take it again, but always go back to the why am I really doing this?
Yeah, no, the why, and sometimes we get a little theme envy, and so if we've had any strengths coaching, especially in the Clifton Strengths space,
Mhm.
after reading the questions, if you do it again, you can kind of read into them a little bit, and then you start trying to manipulate the questions to get what you to like. And
Yes.
I think so. The advice I would add to that is if you're going to do it again, you have to work hard to be as honest as possible.
Mm,
We don't know you. It's not magic. We're just it's based on the questions you answer, right? If you answer them differently the second time, you're going to get different results. That's just the way it
sure.
is. And so I think the key to that is if you're going to do it again, you have to work hard to be honest and not and I'm not dishonest in a way for bad reasons, but just sometimes I want to be a there's things I want to be seen as,
Sure.
right? And
Yep.
what else would you add to
Well,
that?
sometimes we do that subconsciously. So it's not like I have the intention of answering in a way that I'm being
Right.
aspirational, but
Right.
subconsciously, we are answering a little bit to game the system a
Yeah.
little bit. You just want to be careful of the amount of times that you're taking it again and the why, right? Always go back to the why am I doing this and how can I be really truthful and really work to answer how I am as opposed to how I want to be.
Yeah, these questions are great. Joanne's, she says she's connecting in Australia. It's close to 3 a.m. So,
Oh, wow.
Joanna, wondering why you're up this late, but that's okay. You are. You're asking great questions. So she says this recently I was bypassed for a promotion on the grounds it appeared to have limited strategy or strategic experience. I'm interested to hear your thoughts about the strength of strategy and this notion of being strategic. And I love this question because it kind of goes back to our domains in some way. In other words, people have a preconceived notion about leadership that it has to be all strategic or it has to if I'm if I'm a project manager, all my themes have to be executing or I can't do that. Can you talk a little bit about that from let's start from a leadership perspective. Do I have to have strategic to be a leader?
Ooh, such a great question. The short answer is no, you do not. And here's the thing: when you think about the outcome of being strategic, a great way to kind of think through this is to define strategic and what it means to you. That word is so overused, especially in business, that there's so many different connotations to the word. And I might spend some time really thinking about what does this word mean to me? And whatever you land on, that's really the outcome that you're going for. And then reverse engineer and think about how you do that with your strengths. So, for example, I think about a talent like empathy. Empathy can be very strategic, even though it falls in the relationship building category, but it's a strength that absorbs the emotions of others and instinctively has the right words to say. In that, there's a strategy, right? Your words that you're saying that are very relatable to that person, it's because you're being very perceptive and intuitive, but in that you're able to have a strategy of the right words. Or a talent like, let's say, um, responsibility, right? That can also be very strategic, especially when you master the art of what is it that I want to say yes to, because I know from a strategic standpoint I'm going to find a way to get it done. I don't want to over inundate myself by saying yes to too many things, so maybe there's also a strategy in the way that I say no, because saying no doesn't feel good, right? So there's so many different ways that you can get to the outcome. And for you, this person, Joanne, it does sting to be passed up for a role that maybe you really saw yourself in. And within corporate America, there's always a game that is being played. You just have to figure out how to play the game. Is it the relationships? What's valued in the organization? Is it relationships? Is it demonstrating that you can work on certain projects? And I would go back and seek feedback and match up your stories so that when you're in your interview process, you can hit it the next time.
Mm,
Also, think about who are the advocates for you? Who are the people that are cheering for you when you're not in the room? Right, your board of
yeah.
directors. So there's a lot of different things that you want to think about when you're ready to make those jumps. So now I'm getting off on a tangent and started to coach Joanne. Hopefully
It's what you do, Jessica. It's what you do. Isn't that great? I mean, in the role you're in, and that you begin to just start moving down that path naturally, right? That's your leadership role. I'm while you're doing that, I'm going through the chat, figuring out the next 3 or 4 things that we're going to talk about because that's what I do. So it's
how
great to see.
strategic of you, Jen. How
Great.
strategic.
Great to see that. Well, and for me, I've learned, well, and let me just say this story really quick. Back when the earth was still cooling and I was a little bit younger, I applied for a job to be a branch manager at the bank I was working at in a different city. And when I didn't get that role, in the time I was really, really disappointed. And I think about where I am at today and what that would have meant to move strategically at that time and
Mm,
how different my life would have been. And I'm kind
mm,
of glad I didn't
mhm.
take that role. That would have locked me into, and what I know about my own management style, that would have locked me into a situation I probably wouldn't have done very well, just to be honest. And so it worked out. They made the right decision. Didn't feel like it
Yes.
in the day, right? But the leadership made the right decision.
Yes. And it's kind of like rejection is protection in a lot of instances.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
moving you to where you're supposed to be. And when
Yeah.
it's right, and nobody can take it away from you. So
Yeah, yeah. James comes back and says, "Thanks, Jim and Jessica. Achiever number 4, maximizer number 6. So yes, and this is a great comment. He says, I'm trying to succeed at all times and get better with each iteration, but I'm trying more and more to equate
mm,
success with what I'm learning about myself as much as the wins at work. I love that we can't miss that. I'm learning about myself. Like I think oftentimes we only think the success we're having at work or the projects that are getting done or those kinds of things. And yet our own development, right, is that key to success. I think sometimes we don't celebrate those enough. How can we do that? You've got this high individualization. How can we do that in ways? How can we recognize our own growth and then celebrate that in a way that's meaningful? Jessica, any thoughts or ideas on that?
oh, such a great question. Well, growth is so interesting because it's not linear, it happens in waves. So I actually like James's approach of being able to catch himself when that growth is happening and taking that pause to recognize when the growth is happening. So obviously, growth will be very individualized to who you are, what you're doing in the moment. But I do think that in catching yourself, and it's funny because I teach people how to coach all the time. I've been doing that a lot with managers. And I'll ask them, what's your biggest takeaway? And oftentimes people will say, I'm starting to catch myself listening more. I'm starting to catch myself not giving the answers like I would before because I'm stepping more and more into that coaching seat. So I think anytime you can catch yourself red-handed in anything that you're trying to grow around, it's an opportunity to celebrate in your own way. So having achiever, your celebration may look different than a person with high positivity, or maybe you have them both. But think about what is it that I can do to honor this moment? For some of you, you may be thinking, I want to go on to the next the next thing that I want to cross off my list. But can you just in that moment recognize that growth is happening? And in that moment, think about how do I want to honor this moment? What will that look like for me? Maybe think about your strengths. How can you feed your strengths, or what strength is being fed in the moment of growth and development? How are my strengths changing? So I think it's just in the pausing of it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we're in so much of a hurry. If we can just slow down a bit, we'll have those opportunities to explore and continue to expand our perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Keisha wants you to say this again. She says, "Can you please repeat what you said about empathy and a reference to strategy and just being a strong leader overall?"
Oh, yeah, of course. So, um, so when I think about empathy, this is a strength that's highly perceptive and intuitive. And part of the beauty in it is being able to absorb the emotions of others, right? So sometimes you can get to a point where it's like, are those my emotions that I've picked up? Or is this somebody else's, or is this a group? Or, walking through a crowd, sometimes you pick up emotions, but instinctively, because you've absorbed or picked up the emotions, you will have the right words. And there's a strategy in that, because there's a power in being able to have the right words, maybe when someone's feeling down and out, or maybe they're not performing, or maybe they're not saying what's wrong, but you're sensing that something is wrong. And strategically, you can put yourself in their shoes and have the right words. And there's a power in doing that, right? Because people always want to feel like they're understood. As human beings, we want to feel love, we want to feel like we're understood. And,
Yeah.
and people with high
Yeah.
empathy can do that with
Yeah.
ease. Mhm.
Yeah. No, I love that. And not, that's another one of those themes sometimes where people are like, oh, I don't have empathy, so I can't be a leader. And there are
Mm,
other ways of leading as we think about our four domains: influencing, relationship building, executing, and strategic thinking. All of those have elements in leading, and not one
yes,
person can be all things. This is why we need each other, right?
that's
This is why we need to be able to harness this teamwork, both in leadership and in management, and working together to make it happen. Jessica, this time always goes so fast, and we're at the
right.
end of it.
Well,
If you had one piece of advice to give about thinking about leading with your strengths, what would you leave people with?
study your past successes. We talk about that all the time within Clifton Strengths, but I think when it comes to leadership, think about those times where you have led in your lifetime, because those are going to be the clues to what will make you a successful leader in the future. So maybe it was just um, my sister was feeling down and out, and I comforted her. I was able to comfort her. I was able to console her and inspire her about what the future could look like. Or maybe it was when I was a child, there was a bully that was picking on a child, and I confronted that bully and I stood up to him, and I was courageous and bold, right? Think about the stories where you were at your best. I went all the way back to childhood. You probably have a lot in between then, but I think that there's a power in doing that, and they will give you the keys to what your unique leadership will look like in the future.
I think with that, we'll call it a wrap. And Jessica, thanks for spending some time with us today, and appreciate your thoughts on this. And thanks for sticking with it. It was not looking good for technically it was not looking good, and I thought, oh, maybe we're gonna have to move this today. But thanks for sticking with me, and thanks for doing such a great job today. Couple reminders on the way out. Janet asked, joining a little late, will this recording be shared? And of course, we record everything, and it'll actually be available on our Clifton Strengths page right there on LinkedIn. So if you go ahead and follow that, we have a bunch of these scheduled internally to do, and you'll want to follow that page so you get a notification. Just on LinkedIn, search Clifton Strengths and find our showcase page. Follow that so that you don't miss the notification on that as well. All these resources, if you're just hearing this and you're like, man, I want more on this Clifton Strengths, go to gallup.com/Clifton Strengths. We've got a bunch of information for you out there and more learning. If you have any questions, you want to contact us for any reason, you can always send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. I want to thank you for joining us today. And with that, we'll let you get back to your day. Remember, lead with your strengths, right? That's what you have. And go out there and lead with those. Thanks for coming out. With that, we'll say goodbye.